Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Make Love Easy podcast. I have some of my most delightful humans that I know here, uh, Taylor and Scott. How did your awesome relationship come to exist?
I'll let you start with that. We trade telling it often.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I always love hearing his version of the story because it's my favorite story, but I'll also tell it from my perspective because it is one of my favorite stories to tell. So in November 2022, I was going through a huge transitional phase in my life. I was in a relationship at the time, and I was on like the back end of a series of what I call issue-based relationships, which are relationships that are rooted in a lot of karma, drama, tension, like passion, but also not really creating resolution and union. And my deepest desire had always been for my man, like my king, and the person who would essentially be my other half, my better half in a lot of ways. And at this point, I had, found myself really yearning for that relationship, but not knowing where to go or how to find it. And essentially, pretty much spontaneously overnight, I heard about an event in Austin, Texas that I felt called to go to. And so I decided to book this spontaneous 4-day trip to Texas. Never been to Austin before. Had an amazing remembrance of who I am and what I care about and the things that I'm deeply passionate about, which led me to going back to Costa Rica. And while I was in Costa Rica, I was spending time with the man who I was in a relationship with at that time. And it was the worst experience of Costa Rica that I had had. And that was like so rough for me because I had had the most magical like 9 months living in Costa Rica by myself. And then suddenly I'm in this amazing place in this gorgeous like penthouse ocean view villa, feeling like I was in hell in my own life. And it was primarily due to the relationship and how we were relating in the relationship. And so I knew within my heart and soul that this wasn't my person. And yet I felt this obligation to be in the relationship in some ways. Like something inside of me knew that there was something here for me, but simultaneously, I also knew that I wasn't having to stay, so to speak. And the night before he was about to leave to go back to California, I had a moment of, I know I need to make my own decision. And a couple weeks prior, a few girlfriends had invited me to Tulum. And I was like, Tulum, hey, like I've never felt called to go to Tulum. But as soon as they invited me, my soul had just said yes. And then I got in my brain, in my head, and I'm like, but wait, that's not really logistical. And this, all of the stories and the reasons as to why. And so I procrastinated this decision until this night before, and I knew I had to go to Tulum. And so I booked my flights essentially right then and there, flew into Tulum, immediately regretted it, thinking, what the fuck did I just do? Why am I in Mexico? I don't know what I'm doing here, and having essentially a breakdown. Like, I want to go back to Canada. I want to go back to comfort. I don't know what I'm doing here. I need to leave. But then surrendering even deeper into the experience of what life was presenting me with. And I embarked upon a 5 days of like magic, I would say. And on the fifth day, I was at the spa getting a massage. And during this massage, it was like the night before I had gone to this beautiful event. It was like an event with women where we were really connecting sensually, but not sexually, and just like experiencing the intimacy with other women through touch and through cacao and flowers and all of these amazing things where I'm just like, oh my God, this is how I want to experience my life. But then there was this fear in the back of my brain that's like, well, I can't tell the guy that I'm dating because he's going to get upset about this, or he's going to have judgments or stories or whatever it would be. And so then I go to the spa and I'm getting this massage. And while I'm getting this massage, I'm tapping into this deep state of surrender and just saying to myself that I'm ready to let go of whatever's not for me, and I'm ready to receive what is meant for me. And I had really allowed myself to surrender into my heart's deepest desires without any idea or attachment to what that would look like or what that would be. And previously, this was such an impossible thing to do because I love to feel in control and I love to know what's going to happen. And I love to, like, yeah, predict outcomes and feel good about them. And so being in that moment of surrender was something that I had not really tapped into at that level before. But it was such a quantum shift into me really opening up to receive what was actually meant for me, which was me walking into a steam room and this handsome man sitting beside me. And the moment that he looked into my eyes, I had this feeling of just, huh, like peace and home and something that was so familiar and yet so unfamiliar. Something that I'd never felt before, but deep in my soul, it was like that when you know feeling. And so we embarked upon a really beautiful conversation with our friend at the time who kind of opened the doors with an emotional statement of saying, I feel really shy right now. I've never been in the steam room with two women. And his radical honesty was like, oh, I really love this. Like I personally appreciate vulnerability and authenticity and truth. And so his open emotional expression was something where I responded like, that's okay. I feel so shy too sometimes. And they started to tell me about this men's retreat and things that they had done. And I'm like, wow, I'm getting more and more interested because of this level of authenticity that's just starting to come into the conversation. And I think in my heart, I knew the moment that I laid eyes on him that he was my person. And I want to give the mic over to you now and invite in your experience of that moment.
Yeah, I can pick it up from there. Yeah, I'd seen Taylor pass by in front of me while I was at the spa in a business meeting with my business partner at the time. And she walked past, and the second she did, it just derailed my entire conversation, which for me did not happen because Tulum's full of beautiful women. I had been living there for a year already. So to have a beautiful woman walk past, it wasn't a big deal. But for whatever reason, she walked past and I was just like, whoa. And he was like, hey, dude, back here in the meeting. And I'm like, okay. She walks past again and it derails me a second time. And I was like, I have to go meet this woman. And I go in and I couldn't find her. And I continue the meeting. I'm like, oh, she must have left, missed it. Continue the meeting for an hour. And right as we're about to leave, we're literally about to walk out of the spa, I see her walk into the steam room. And I tell my friend at the time, I was like, if I don't walk into that steam room and meet this woman, it'll be the biggest regret of my life. And he was like, well, let's do it in that case. Mm-hmm. So we walk in, have the interaction that you just shared. And when we got out, I invited you to come join me in the ice bath. Yeah. And so we'd only been talking for a few minutes. We go get in the ice bath and we're sitting eye to eye, just holding each other in like the coldest ice bath I've ever been in because the water's circulating and there's a whole reason why it's cold, colder than usual. And we were in there for 4.5 minutes, just like eye to eye, holding each other, having just met, not knowing each other at all, yeah, but deeply knowing each other.
Yeah.
And I got out and I said what I still think was one of the worst pickup lines ever, but perfect for you. As I was like, I would love to pray with you sometime. That was what I said when I got out of the ice bath, which I had never said to a woman before. And you said, I'd like that.
Yeah.
And so we traded numbers and I left the spa. And when I was walking out, my friend at the time was like, dude, you just met the one. He's like, she's it. And my answer was, yeah, I know. And he was like, no, you don't fucking get it. You just met the one. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like it was just I knew. And the feeling was just this feeling of home and peace, like you said. And to wrap this story here, to give the mic back to you, Taylor and I were both seeing other people. And I actually had a date that night with the woman that I was seeing. And I broke it off with her right there on the spot, and Taylor broke it off with the guy she was with.
Yeah, to like bring that back to
Yeah.
the dynamic that I was in. It was such a fascinating thing because when Scott asked for my number, my heart said yes, like my body said yes, but then there was a part of me that was like, but wait, I shouldn't say yes because I'm in a relationship and I could feel this tearing happening internally. But then it was just this knowingness that was like, well, if I don't say yes, this is going to be such a deep betrayal to myself. And I am at a point where I am done and I'm complete betraying myself. And that was a devotion that I had made like 2 nights before. And when I saw his Instagram, I had this thought that was like such a quantum thought that I was so weirded out by it after. But the thought was, I'm so proud to be with him. And I was like, that is such a weird thing to think because I don't even know this guy. But I feel like there was a future memory that was like knowing that he was my person. And so I went home and called the guy that I was with and told him, like, I don't know what's here for me, but I know there's something here for me that I need to follow. And he ended things with me right then and there. And then Scott and I went on our first date 2 days later on 11/11, and
The rest is
the
history.
rest is in history and progress. So that's how
Amazing.
it's going to be.
Epic, delightful, fun, cool. There's so many different directions we can go from that. Um, I especially enjoyed, as you were telling the story, Taylor, there was one moment where you put your right hand on his left thigh. So this is giving love, giving light, whatever. And then that thigh is the feminine side. So you are activating his intimacy. You are the embodiment of his intimacy with the feminine. And like, and she's like, I'll do more of that now. The sacred body language translation, just
It's
seeing.
interesting because I didn't feel called to put my left hand on her hand. I actually reached over and put my right hand on there.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, you're
So
you're both
fascinating.
giving into something
Yeah.
that is
Mm.
bigger than you, that traverses you, is my perception. Of course, I mean that's why you're here.
Mm.
Is an iconic, sort of like mythic, even potentially quality to the experience that you've had that has been magnetic since the first moment we sat down at radio and I heard about it. And that was like 5 months ago or something. It's
It was
crazy.
like three. Yeah. Yeah.
3 months ago, yeah.
Yeah, when you all first moved here. So
Yeah.
um here's what I heard, and I heard a lot. Um and I'd love to hear more on a lot of these. Like there, you've told me, sir, that there is an awareness viscerally that if someone's your person, you'll just know, you'll feel it. You can tune in, you can ask. And I heard Taylor actually describe it in her expression too. And so what leads to that is someone having built a large, strong, grounded trust and clarity around what that internal authority is
Yeah.
and where it comes from, and that it is reliable, ideally, potentially through past experience. So that faculty, that organ of intuition, we might call it, that leads to a deep soul level knowing, such that it is just that simple. Oh, this person's my person, this person's not. Like, what did it take for each of you to achieve that, to wake that up, to build it?
Mm.
It's a great question.
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. Um, you said something really beautiful, which was learning that feeling through experience. And for me, that's really how I learned it was from knowing what it feels like so deeply to ignore my inner knowings and ignore like the truth that I feel inside of myself or the sensations that I'm experiencing or the voice of truth that lives inside of me or the whispers of my soul. And to know that contrast so well of what it looks and feels like to not live in alignment with my truth and to ignore my intuition and what is created as a byproduct of that. And then those moments where I do follow that voice inside of me, that even when it doesn't necessarily make sense, it makes sense and it's true. And that is, it's so nuanced and it's so layered and it's so subjective to each person and each and every moment that it's not, there's a blanket statement of like, here's how you know, and here's how you don't know. And we can go into all of the, you know, layers of trauma and conditioning and beliefs and programming and like unconscious attraction patterns. And like, are you feeling the feeling of safety because it's familiar, because it reminds you of the dynamic you had with your parents? And that's why it feels like home. Or is it the kind of home that is something so much deeper, that is essentially like the essence of your soul that you're seeing reflected to you in another human being? And that knowingness that I now know within myself has come through so much trial and error and contrast and discerning that trust within myself through failure and life experience. And so that would be my response to that question.
Hmm.
I have a different approach, a
Yeah.
much more masculine approach, which I love. I love the like polarity here. Um, I've coached a number of guys into finding their person. And for me, it always starts with semen retention. Like that's a big critical piece because there's two critical pieces. One is knowing the truth of what you want,
Yeah.
like actually knowing what you're looking for in a partner. And we both had done this really
Yeah.
beautiful exercise where we didn't even know this. It's a cool story that I'll share very briefly. I had listened to a podcast by this guy named Paul Chek, who runs the Chek Institute, big fan of his. And he had talked about calling in your person. He said the way you do it is you get very, very clear on a couple of important categories. The first one is who are they? So you just write down the qualities of like who is your person. I wrote down a bunch of different things like she's brown haired, she's fit, she's a badass in her industry of whatever she's doing. She's I had a whole list of qualities of who she was. Just who is this person to me? Then it was what are you going to create together? You answer that. You write down how are you going to handle conflict together, and what memories do you want to create, and how do they feel? Like there's other questions you can ask, like what important life milestones are you going to experience with them?
Mm.
And I'd written down my whole list almost 3 years prior to meeting you.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I had done my own version of that prior to meeting him, but I did it a little bit differently. It was very intuitive, where I went through this process of what I call our shadow partner, where it's like a Venn diagram essentially, where you're looking at like the positive qualities and aspects that you find that you're attracting in people that you're dating, and essentially writing down and like getting clear on like, okay, in all of the people that I've ever dated in my life, what are the things that I love? What are the things that I value? What are the things that I appreciate? What are the things that I desire in partnership? And then you go through all of those same people and you look at what are all of the qualities of these people that I don't love, that are triggering, that I don't value, that I don't desire in partnership. And you look at those two things and essentially you come to the conclusion that this is what you're unconsciously attracting.
Mm.
And so through that practice, I was able to see that I kept attracting very dishonest partners. And you can go all the way back to like, you know, parents and stuff like that. But ultimately, my list, the number one quality on my list was honest. And you know what Scott did on our first date ever? He emptied out the trash can of all of the things that not most men would share. Told me how much debt he's in, if he's dating someone, where he's at financially, like literally laid it
How
all
much
out
income I make on the first date.
on the first date. And I imagine for some women, that would be a lot to receive. But for me, I was like, oh, that checks. That checks. This is checking something that I know I desire, because it was more than just a feeling. Because I feel like we had that feeling of knowing, but then there was like a getting to know each other and actually find out, are they my person? Are they truly the person that I desire to be with? Because had Scott not been so honest, I might pull back a little bit more and realize that, like, yeah, maybe I had that spark of a feeling or that settling in feeling that's like, oh, yeah, I know. but there might have been things in his like current state of being that didn't actually align with what I desire. And I feel like that's where like a lot of women in particular can see and feel that like, yeah, he's my person, but it's the potential version of him and not the truth of who he is. And I think we can oftentimes fantasize about like what we want someone to be rather than like, is this really who they are right now? And so when we did the lists, I'll let you share a little bit more about that because you were going to tell the story about the
Yeah.
lists.
Well, we had both put lists together not knowingly. And, like for me to wrap up this point on how I called you in,
Yeah.
that list plus semen retention was exactly how I did it. Because it's when I am not having sex with women, like
Mhm.
even you, we didn't have sex for a month and a half, even after we met,
Yeah.
knowing we
Yeah.
were each other's people.
Yeah.
Because there's an element of sex that distorts the truth of who somebody is. And it's so fascinating, even on the second date with somebody, if you haven't had sex with them on the first date, how much more you get to know them,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
And so having that list for me was a like, okay, I know what I want. And then the semen retention kept it like pure. It was like, okay, I'm not going to fuck this up.
Mhm.
And I tell this story often. I think, Lewis, you might get a kick out of this story. I had a year into doing this process. I went on a date with a woman. We had a great date. It was fantastic. And I invited her on another date where I was like, I'm gonna make dinner at my house. And I invited her over. You know this story.
I've
And
heard it many
yeah.
times, yes.
And I invited her over and go into the kitchen to make food. And I come out in the living room and she's completely naked in my living room. And I told her, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I already told you beforehand, like, we're not having sex. I'm practicing semen retention, all this kind of stuff. I instantly knew from that she wasn't my person. Like I just knew the second I walk out my living room and she's there. I was like, oh, that's not my woman. This woman gets extremely triggered, very upset because I just turned her down. I hit every wound she had ever, like that was like probably a worst case scenario wound. And I wanted to like honor her deeply by like not like being gentle with this woman's heart. But she runs out of the house. She like, puts on her clothes and just leaves. And I have this beautiful dinner that I've been making. And she calls me while she's on the road driving, really upset. And I was just like, she's like, why? Why is all this stuff? And I was like, hold on, hold on. I'm not gonna use her name, but I was just like, if you close your eyes and feel in, am I your person? And her answer was no. And I was like, beautiful. So now we have this understanding like we're not each other's person. So it doesn't have to be a big wounding thing about this. We now know the truth. Like we're both seeking the person we want to be with, and it's not us. So that's why we're not going to have sex because you're not my woman. And that helped her really calm down. She ended up coming back and having dinner anyway. She was like, can I come back and have dinner? I was like, yeah, you can come eat dinner. Had a beautiful dinner. It was the last time I saw her. And I bring that story up often with men because it's such an illustration of like when you know what you want and you are holding your sexual energy really like strong, it's such a like discernment factor. So when I met you, I just knew because I had gone on dates with so many women that it was like the moment I met you, I was like, oh, that's it. There she is. That's who I've been looking for.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Hmm. There's a lot. That was great. Um, so let's go back to all the way back to Taylor's talking about intuition, right? So each person arguably could have a different, what I've been trained in, intuition blueprint. Like, is it shivers up the spine? Is it a tensing of the gut? Is it like inspiration in the head? Is it a voice? Is it suddenly a vision? And so I hear how your pattern in the past of like self-betrayal, you started to track it and you were like, oh, no more. And then the tuning in gave and the experience, you said it was beautiful. It never, even if it doesn't make sense, it makes sense. And that reminded me of a friend of mine. She says, God's plans always never make sense. to the
Mhm.
mind or to the ego, right?
Right.
And it makes its own kind of sense if you're patient and you let it unfold through embodying it and just expressing from it and allowing it to be there. So I wanted to dance with that. And then this other thing about shadow partnering, that's so cool because, even if someone, I remember my last partner when we were in Costa Rica, or I was in Costa Rica and then she hadn't returned yet, and we were long distance for a little bit. And I kept saying, hey, stop forgetting that you're my queen. The only way given where I was standing at that point, what I saw in her in terms of virtue and character, I kept reminding her, I was like, the only way you can come out of that role is if you keep doubting it,
Mhm.
which was sourced by some of her deepest wounds. And like, so what I heard in your distinguishing of how he was showing up that's really interesting is he could have been exactly what you were looking for, but not choosing to express from that identity.
Yeah.
And he had to express from that identity. He had to take the actions. And it wasn't like he's a puppet on a string playing a part on a list. It was that there was an opportunity and a choice for him to be embodied as that which was most authentic to him or not. And if he had hidden, held back, camouflaged, whatever, this might not have happened.
Completely. Completely. And there was a very particular moment where I think, in the process, in the conversation of shadow partners, where we all have shadows and unconscious patterns that play out, I think there was a moment where my heart had been through so much pain and heartbreak that I didn't feel like I was actually ready for a relationship. But his leadership and his commitment and his certainty was something that I had always desired in a partner. And I remember this one day in particular, I was in Tulum and I was out for lunch with a few of my girlfriends, and I had gotten a message from Scott saying, I need to know when you're going to open your heart by Friday. And if you're not going to open your heart, it was something like, I don't know if we can continue to do this. And I remember there was this very distinct moment of like feeling the pressure to respond and tell him, yes, I'm going to open my heart. Like, yes, I'm going to like do it, and like forcing my heart to open, but recognizing that that was not true to me and that was dishonoring myself and that was continuing the pattern of people pleasing and self-abandonment and betrayal, and recognizing that like, oh, that's my own shadow. Like that's my own unconscious pattern. That's created a lot of the dynamics that I've had in past relationships. And recognizing that like, okay, actually, I don't know if I will ever open my heart. I truly don't know that. And I don't remember if I just felt that internally or if I messaged it to you.
Felt it.
Yeah, so I got really honest with myself and was just like, I don't know, and I'm not going to put the pressure on myself. And if that means that this man needs to know when I'm going to open my heart, and that's the only way he can be in relationship with me, then I need to honor myself and also honor him. And there was like this graceful like surrender and like almost like a willingness to let go of something that I so deeply desired, because I knew so deep in my heart that like, yeah, he is like he could be my future husband, he could be my potential person, and at the same time I'm not going to sacrifice myself at the cost of just keeping this relationship. And so I don't think I actually said anything, but energetically something shifted inside of me, because maybe 15 minutes later this man calls me and he says, I'm so sorry for saying that the way that I did. And I want you to know that, like, you never actually have to open your heart. I'm choosing you all the way, no matter what. And I could feel this, like, my heart just opened, that subtle little opening that was like, oh, it's safe. Like, it's safe for me to open my heart. There's no force, there's no pressure on me. It's just, ah, okay. And that was one of those little moments that allowed me to feel like, yes, I can open my heart to him because he's not trying to make me be anything other than what I am. And I feel like that was something that, I really was so grateful for in you, even when you did share parts of yourself, that it's like, okay, I get to see all of you. And that seeing all of each other, I think, is one of the most valuable things that we continue to give each other.
Mhm.
Wow. Um, that that's why you're here. I'm choosing you no matter what, exactly as you are,
Mm.
with zero doubt and zero need for her to show up in a certain way,
Yeah.
which then paradoxically gave her the paved pathway to show up exactly as your heart most desired.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'll just, I know this conversation is about you, but I am also here. And I'm having experiences. So I gave that grace to three separate women in the past 5 years. Like I was ready. And it just so happens they were not the right ones.
Yeah.
And as I look back, one of the concerns I have for people, like make a list and engage in semen retention, knowing that you're going to manifest your ideal partner, and then feel in and trust your inner knowing. Like that's the path we're paving so far. Like someone might, as I think I might have, choose to be with someone and to give that depth of commitment to someone who is not fundamentally able or available to reciprocate or is that person. Like when I look back, yeah, I see that I had a quantum of doubt in the room, with each of those people, which arguably manifested as them saying yes to marrying me and then coming back with a no eventually. And I discern like full on grounded certainty in you all about each other, and it's still present. How long have you been together?
Almost 3 years.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. That really changes the game because it's highly unlikely that you're in limerence chemicals or honeymoon period anymore. Like there's something there that transcends biology and neurochemistry and mammal animal release. That's freaking cool.
Yeah, yeah, since the very beginning, actually. Yeah.
Mhm.
Huh.
Yeah, that part hasn't been a major factor in the relationship. So, yeah.
So this opens up a whole bunch of like different questions. One of which is like, Scott, where does your clarity and certainty come from? And I ask this because the best leaders are always followers first. And in order for her to follow you fully, you have to be following something that gives you that certainty. So one side of it is the inner authority you were talking about, but what else? What are you following in this life such that your certainty and confidence in your assessment of her in those moments could be so grounded and clear? And where you were leading her too. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's a really beautiful question. It's one that I wrestle with every single day because the answer is God.
Yes.
And my relationship to that word has been developing and changing. I made that list in 2020, about 3 months after I did Bufo alvarius, which, if you know what Bufo is, uh, in many ways they call it, DMT is the active ingredient, and they call DMT the God molecule. And in that particular experience, which I've talked about on my podcast, I did a lot of Bufo. I did a lot more than the normal dose. And I had an extremely intense experience, one that I don't ever recommend Bufo to anybody. And at the same time, I met God, but it was God not in the like blissful, loving, like, kumbaya sense. It was the biblical, your eyes bleed and you pray that you live through this experience of seeing the full expression of the I am. And it felt like every single cell in my body was being torn apart and slammed back together in the most painful and most orgasmic way possible, an infinite number of times over and over again for infinity. And that experience changed my life without a shadow of a doubt, started my awakening process at full tilt, and really enabled me to start leaning in on prayer and various other things that were the backbone of me even connecting with you.
Mhm.
And by the time you and I had connected, I was already deep on my path of prayer. But that process, along with a number of others, came as a result of leaps of faith. So it was these big quantum jumps. We're talking about intuition a lot on this podcast, and maybe that's a developing theme here, is people learn to trust that sense of intuition by following it, by doing the uncomfortable or the kind of like not logical thing that your gut instinct or whatever it is telling you to do. You do that a number of times and see the outcome of it. And if that outcome's favorable or positive, which it hasn't been always for me, but I will say a significant enough amount of times, like 75 to 80% of the times, it has been extremely, like, it's been better than what I thought it was going to be. I've taken a number of those types of leaps of faith at a life altering level that when Taylor came around, I was completely ready for it. I was 100% ready for that because I had done significant, extraordinary bets on myself already up to that point.
Yeah. It's interesting because I also did the same thing in my own life.
Yeah.
Like I did so many big leaps of faith, bets on myself based on what something deeper in me was calling me to. And a perfect example of that is me booking a one-way trip to Tulum for 2 weeks and then shortly after, like ending a lease and then meeting my future husband. And I think for me, a lot of it came from these big jumps. And so I trusted even him too. Like for me to jump into his leadership, it also came from me leaning in and surrendering into something greater than myself. And so we both had that in our own lives. And I'm still wrestling with my relationship with God. Personally, I call it life, like the energetics of just like life as a whole and all of the like moving parts and like how we are playing an active role in creating, and like prayer is like our intentions to life and not just us praying to something outside of ourselves, but it's like we're actively participating in it. And I feel like because we both had those moments of like leaps of faith individually, we could take our leap of faith into our relationship together. And that's like what we really built it on in a lot of ways.
Neither of you were just following a human.
Yeah.
Both of you were arguably following God or life within you. It just happened to show up that one day, that one night as this guy for you,
Mhm.
Yeah.
or in this guy, or in the direction that this guy was going. Um, I want to go to general principles before I talk about my where I'm at with all of this because it's really fascinating. You talk about following God, um, and like, yeah, that arguably. Uh, Arguably, there's a dharmic quality to your relationship. You talked about issue-based relationships. That's karma, right?
Yeah.
Where people are working out unconsciousness unconsciously. And then there's a line that gets crossed where someone is still trying to work out their karma, but they're doing it consciously. And then eventually they get to a place where, okay, my relationships are a reflection of I've worked out enough karma to where I know what I'm here for and I'm here to do it no matter what. And you're here to help me with that. And I'm here to help you with your version of that. So yeah, would love to hear about that. Like if that has played that journey.
Mhm. That has been the backbone of what's kept us together.
Huh.
Mhm.
You know, we have this saying, like, happily ever after, you meet the one, and it's this like fairy tale thing. It's like, oh shit, it's Prince Charming just met the princess. And no fairy tale ever talks about what happens after Prince Charming meets the princess. Well, what we say is that yeah, the morning after, Prince Charming has morning breath, and Sleeping Beauty has to take a shit. And it becomes real.
Yeah.
It becomes where the rubber hits the road. And in a conscious relationship, in so many ways, it's actually the hardest of all the relationships because the conscious one, especially the divine union one, well, it's about becoming divine union within ourselves. And that path is a constant mirror of all of the disregarded and unloved elements of myself reflected in you,
period.
The end.
Yeah. Yeah. Like all of the triggers, all of the trauma, all of the past unresolved stuff, all of the ancestral patterns, like everything still gets to come up. It's not like, oh, I've healed everything and now I'm ready for like the divine union conscious relationship. I'm perfect, no more karma drama to heal through. It's just that there's a deeper devotion to doing it all the way together. And I think for us, we both really value traditional marriage. Like we value the tradition of marriage and union and like being in it with someone all the way and doing the work together and like really working through things together rather than having that like, oh, I feel complete. Like I got all of my work done with you. Like I'm healed, move on. There's someone else better who I will never be triggered by or never have challenges with. But instead, we're in this like, we are consistently alchemizing within ourselves. And then that is immediately reflected within the relationship. And then our relationship just gets to continue to rise and rise and rise. And we've been contemplating this concept of the third entity being the relationship and the union, and how we are in devotion to that relationship that is bigger than just me as Taylor or Scott as Scott, but we're coming together to create something greater than just us. And that is a service to something beyond our own trauma and drama. But it's like, what's the higher purpose that we came here together to fulfill? And I know he inspires my work and I inspire his work. And we consistently like allow what we move through individually and together to inspire what we do within our purposes within the world. And so, yeah, I feel like that is what keeps us together in a lot of ways through all of the challenges, because we're like, okay, yeah, this is hard right now. Like we're moving through a hard thing. And simultaneously, there's a devotion to something greater than just like, oh, I want to be in the easy relationship where there's no challenges. Because I think that's where the happily ever after mindset comes in sometimes, is there's the fantasy of what it will look like once you find your person versus the truth and the reality that, yeah, there is still humanness in the divine.
Yeah. Jesus was both God and man, you know?
I like that you came with this pithy punch. And so in my training, I call that creationship, right?
Mhm.
A relationship that's about more than just itself. Now, the tricky part is, and this is where this becomes a conversation not just about dating or relating, but about God, really, and spirituality and possibly religion, is like the deepest version of purpose that we can get can't be something that we made up. It can't be an assessment or a discernment that we figured out with our ego mind. Even the ego mind is still it's still like putting fragments together in hopes of like, well, this will hold together, and that must be why I'm here. And so I absolutely agree with you. Like the relationship has to be strong and sturdy and sharp enough in its container and its agreements, its commitments, and its practices, shared values around traditional marriage. Like that's what's going to have the thing endure. Awakening what I call relentless love in partnerships and then maintaining that if both parties consent and they're all in. What was it? Your phrase was in it with someone all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my definition of the one is it's the person who chooses you as much as you are choosing them.
hmm
Because we think like, oh, I think they're the one, but like, are they choosing you as much as you're choosing them? It's like mutual commitment, mutual choice, and like we're in it together. The one is not one person out there that is like magically made for you. The one is the one that's choosing you as much as you're choosing them. Like we have an infinite amount of soulmates and people who could potentially be our person, but your person is the person that's choosing you and being in it with you all the way through all of that. And that is such a sacred thing to find in someone.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, the deeper reflection on the masculine side is like we're talking about purpose and the one and dharma and how all these things relate. And for me, your purpose, at least the way I view purpose, is it's the thing that's going to kill you. It's going to ask your life. It's going to ask your ego. It's going to ask the thing you don't want to give. That's how you know it's true. And the relationship in so many ways is in service to that. I had this vision. I have visions every once in a while. I find that weird to even say on a podcast, but I get them like in meditation and things. And one of the visions I had was of Jesus on the cross being crucified and Mary Magdalene at his feet. You know, in the Bible and in the Christian tradition, we don't give Mary Magdalene much, uh, shouldn't get much of anything. And in this vision, she was his woman for sure, his sacred union partnership, his other half. And she did not stop him from being crucified. There was not an element of like her, like, no, don't take my man, and trying to fight the Romans off or anything. She just stood there eye to eye, heart blasted open, watching the life leave the love of her life's eyes. That is divine union at the most sacred level, like in such full service to his purpose.
Mhm.
I don't have words for it. It's too sacred, you know, in so many ways. She, the pain that that woman had to have experienced, I can't imagine what it would be like. He was in deep physical pain, but the emotional pain that she went through, I imagine was comparable in so many ways. And to hold in that, I know that's what gave him the courage to keep dying to this mission in so many ways. And in our partnership, that gives me fuel all the time to keep being willing to figuratively die to what's being asked of me every single day. Sometimes I do a better job than others, but you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Beautiful. They don't give her as much as the Gnostics do, but in The Chosen, Mary Magdalene really has a strong role,
Does
and
she? Yeah.
really love it, I think. Yeah. Um, so, what do people need to know about how to clear themselves to hear that internal voice and be available for this type of guidance and surrender, both to purpose and to discerning their one?
Let the master speak on this one.
The first thing that's coming up for me is breath. Our breath, in a lot of ways, can allow for that spaciousness for our soul to actually speak to us. And we can move out of that sympathetic state that is the ego mind, essentially, that is creating stories and meaning and defining right and wrong and this and that and creating, like, projecting the future and getting into that conscious, aware, open-hearted space through deep breaths and through slowing our body and like regulating our nervous system. And that is the number one thing that I would say someone could do any given moment in time to be able to access the wisdom of their intuition. And it can be as simple as just like noticing, like, how am I breathing right now? And is this breath creating expansion in my energy or contraction in my energy? Because whenever we're contracted, it's like that voice can't get in. You can't hear that voice. When we are in that fight or flight state, the sympathetic state, we're in protection and self-preservation. We're in survival mode. And when we're in survival mode, we're always going to reference the past to see what's possible for the future. And that's where we see a lot of patterns being created is like it's familiar in our nervous system. So we will oftentimes go to what we know, and that's ancestral, that's lineage, that's our parents, that's the patterns of our past. And it's not necessarily what we desire, but it's what we know. And so for me, breath has been the greatest medicine for me in my life. And I've gone on a very symbolic journey of healing with my breath, which is for another conversation. But with the breath, we can create that spaciousness for our higher self to come through, for God to come through, for our intuition to speak to us, and to clear out the traumas and the pains that live within our nervous system in a lot of ways. Like when we are in that energy, well, we can actually hear ourselves and we can hear the voice inside of us speak to us. And that's where oftentimes, truth is where we can actually really tap into what our soul wants. And it's removing the shame and the self-judgment that we have on ourselves for what is true for us. Like most people aren't really honest with themselves because they're ashamed of what their truth might be or how other people might perceive it. And when we can be so curious and compassionate with ourselves around what's actually true and love ourselves through that truth, well, then our intuition can guide us in the direction that is actually in alignment with our highest truth. And so compassion is another huge piece of this, is like really loving ourselves through our pain and through our failures and through our trauma, and not making ourselves wrong for it and wrong for maybe what we've created or what we've attracted or what we have had happen in relationships in the past, but allowing there to be that space to find out like what is true for me, what I actually want, and doing even that shadow partner practice to look at like, okay, what have I attracted in the past? And can I take ownership of that and really find that like, yes, I did play a role in calling in these kind of partners. And what did I learn from these experiences? And who did I become? And what did life ask me to become? What did God ask me to become that maybe I'm still resisting in myself? Like, what is life asking me to be or to let go of or to step into that maybe my stubborn parts are resisting? And can I courageously take a leap of faith and step into becoming that within myself? Because that version of me is the match for the relationship that I so deeply desire. There are parts of me that I need to sacrifice in order to actually have the love that I want. There are parts of me that I need to love in order to receive the love that I desire. There are parts of me that are not welcome in this relationship because they will sabotage the relationship. Can I surrender those? Can I let those parts of me go so that I can be who God is asking me to be? So that's my response to that.
You chose the right ones. Yeah.
Thank you.
So there's two different directions, and this is moving towards the end because this is really ripe. It's really like beautiful and really clear and distinct. One direction is let's talk about God. Let's talk about God and maybe even Christ and maybe even Scripture.
Let's
So
do it.
I've spent the past. I mean, you're wearing a cross, so you what is it? You open the door, Your Honor. Um, um, For me, I've spent the past 4 months desperately trying to indoctrinate myself into scripture. And it's led to an escalating number and variety of variables, questions, and unanswered and unanswerable problems about the nature of scripture and spirituality as expressed there specifically. And the question for me has not been, is there value in this as an articulation of God's purpose, God's promise, God's container for relationship, right? Because who are you following? Well, I'm following God. Okay, I'm following God in Christ because he's the best expression of love. It's the 50,000 interpretations of Christianity that exist around the planet. You take one verse, you, you can even take the verses about lust and about sexual immorality, and you can interpret those a dozen different ways.
Yeah.
There is no authoritative body unless you're Catholic. Then they've got a tradition for the past several thousands of years. And so like, why is this relevant here? Why is this relevant to me? Well, I'll back up. This is shameless self-sharing and might as well show you how your gifts unpack onto a person, right? Because our people will probably enjoy that, or into someone's life. When I was broken up with last year, I was in so much pain that I was like, I never want to experience this again. And if I don't have to, why would I? And maybe the reason I have so often is because it wasn't a divine union which as it came to me through Christian scriptures interpreted by Earthwaking University was the one, right? God designated and designed one person for you, and you keep going for the one who isn't that one. And so I made a deal with God. The same God who I believed sent me these past four women using making a list, semen retentioning, and feeding the field with the feeling fulfilled, which is a great phrase. Feeling the field with the feeling fulfilled, living in my imagination as if she was already there. And so that same God, that same infinite intelligence, I said, all right, you know what? I'm done. This last one is going to be the best one, is going to be the final relationship of my life. And I know it can be easy and fun because that's how these last several games were won. Like I manifested Sally in less than 3 months through that intention. And then the one before that, and the one before that. So I said, God, all right, I believe in you. I trust that I'm worthy to receive this quality of relationship, and I'm ready for it. I'm ready for um, choosing someone no matter what exactly as they are. I'm ready for being in it with someone all the way. And then there was 6 months of like no dating, no sex, no relationships because I'm protecting this intention. Then I came back into the world of dating and it wasn't easy, it wasn't fun, it wasn't quick, and it was very painful. And it was like, I don't know that I can trust that God. And now I'm playing a different game. Previously it was, oh, let me just manifest my beloved and it'll be the next best relationship. But now I'm playing the game of like, no, this is it. If I don't have to suffer through, and I talk to my men in Awaken Relentless Love and Partnerships, the course, and I'm like, which would you prefer? A woman who's just physically into you or physically and intimately emotionally? And they always say, well, that. Why would I only go for that if I could have both? All right. Well, which would you prefer? A woman who you could have a relationship that never has to end with, or one that ends in another painful breakup? And universally, they would always say this, because who wants unnecessary pain? So playing that game, like I have this escalating doubt and distrust of God. I have this escalating distrust of Christian scripture. One of my best friends has magic and miracles, multimillionaire, founded the village in Costa Rica. And I was like, dude, what about these problems with the resurrection and whether or not it was historical? Let's talk about these problems of it looks like some scribes added the end of the Gospel of Mark in order to feel better about the fact that it ended really dark with just the death of Christ and there was no resurrection there. So the question becomes, what faith do I put in and what in specifically and to what end? Because where I'm standing, you've seen me facilitate. I've had enough experience to believe there is something that is guiding me some of the time into producing more results than Lewis's little meat sack, tiny brain, mini me, ego self can produce. But I'm not sure that I'm willing to stake my life and the whole future history of my relationships on this thing that I know not what. And so what it's led to in the past year is like the past 6 months of like, well, let me just go for sex because do I really have to cut off and kill off my desire for sensuality and touch and connection and the nourishment of that because I'm waiting for a wife from a God I'm not sure that I can trust will ever deliver, who suddenly decided to stop delivering in the way that I previously had been conditioned to believe and trust will be fun, easy, and quick. Like there's probably resistance in there. There's probably like judgments. There's probably like, I just decided, all right, well maybe I go to work on the nervous system level stuff that caused me to attract three avoidant attached people. Maybe God's waiting for me to build a business empire because you got to have a certain amount of accomplishments and money and achievement and market share until God can send you your wife, right? No. You have to be living your purpose in a certain way, right? You can't just be oriented towards wanting to be in the service to the highest good of the world. So this is my not so secret agenda behind asking for this podcast is like I find myself able to teach and preach to men, you can get laid. You can create an epic relationship no matter who you are. And because who I'm talking to is mostly awkward, anxious men who haven't had anything, they're just happy to believe that something is possible for them. Whereas I'm playing the game of anything less than my highest choice is self-sabotage. And I've come so heartbreakingly, heartachingly close to that. And given that Care Bear stare of deep love to women who weren't available to reciprocate, that now I'm in this place of like, do I just say fuck it all and go for whatever my mammal body craves so that I can get regulated and co-regulated by other humans? Or do I keep hoping and spitting and shouting into the void at a God who has shaken my trust and faith in him, hoping that I'll get a clear answer? I don't know. I don't know. So I'm done. Thank you.
First, I want to honor and acknowledge you for having the courage to share it. These wrestlings are ultimately what it is to be human,
Mhm.
you know? Like if if somebody had the true answer, they'd be a trillionaire, you know? Like if someone really actually knew the truth that was the same cookie cutter answer for every human being on the planet, they'd own everything. It's what every religion is trying to pitch, right? They're like, come to us. We'll be the one that shows you the way.
Mhm.
And in so many ways, I have found that just the seeking and the struggle and the pain of it all is the answer. As unfortunate as it might be to hear, the moment that I have fallen in love with the pain is the moment that it all starts to turn for me each time. And it's always a new pain that I get to fall in love with. Right now, I'm in the love of falling in love with the pain of creating lead gen in my business. And I've resisted it for almost 2 years. And now I finally just looked at the pain long enough to say, okay, I'm not looking for a miracle anymore, God. I'm done looking for a miracle. I'm going to create it for myself. And that is a really big shift because so many people are praying to a God that they're like beggars. They're like, please give me what I need. And God's like, you have everything. Just fucking make it. And it's oftentimes what I've found the deepening in my relationship with God has come from when I have finally given up on God and gone and done it for myself and then made it happen, that my relationship with God has actually become stronger and deeper. As paradoxical as that might sound.
No, it does not sound paradoxical at all. It sounds fucking amazing. Did you want her to answer as well, or you
You
look like you're
you might
passing?
have, she's been through her own journey, you know? You
Yeah,
hated God when we met.
I did. I did. I have wrestled with God my whole life. And I think, like most of us, have gone on the journey of religious deconditioning and religious unraveling from what everyone tells you is the right way or the thing to do or like the almighty solution. And I think it's funny because as humans, we have this tendency to pedalize external authority and think that somebody else knows more than we do. And then we constantly come back to the truth that, well, I know me and what's true for me better than anybody else ever will. And I think maybe someone has the answer because it looks like they have something figured out that I'm struggling with. And then we remember that, like, well, for me, it's always remembering that my path is my path and that God is shaping me into the woman that I am meant to be for the life that I am meant to have. And I am shaping myself through every single choice that I make. And all of the pain, all of the suffering and challenges that I'm experiencing, I can either be angry at God for what I'm experiencing, or I can lean in on the gratitude that this is shaping me and molding me into who I am. And it's going at it with the mindset of, now I need to fix something so that I can get the result that I want. But instead, really loving whatever is true for us at that moment in time. And it's so much easier said than done. I used to get so angry at him for just being like, well, just accept it and just love it and just like, like enjoy what you're in. And I'm like, fuck off with that. Like, that doesn't work for me. And I had to go through that period of just like hating and resisting and like not trusting and being so angry at God and angry at life and angry at like everything, to get to a point where now I have a tattoo that says let go, let God on my neck. And it's like, okay, what is that for me? It came from wrestling. It came from frustration. It came from pain. It came from suffering. It came from resisting. It came from defining my own relationship with an energy that I don't think anybody can define other than like what's true for us. And even his relationship with God is so vastly different than mine. And I think it's finding that our own interpretation and our own relationship, and remembering that every single relationship isn't just sunshine and roses and butterflies and bliss. We live in a world of duality that is pain and it is pleasure. And so God is going to provide us with pleasure and provide us with pain. And can we love the full spectrum of it, knowing that we actually like are kind of kinky and we also enjoy it?
God's a sadist and a masochist.
Yeah.
God can
Just
totally
like we
be
are.
in love with a life that is just pure plain pain. For sure.
That was brilliant. Go team. Like there were so many puzzle pieces and there was such a constellation that arose in your speaking. So the first piece is the Camus, he used to say, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. So of course Sisyphus was rolling a rock up a hill that would always fall back down over and over and over again. And in context, in the myth of Sisyphus, Camus was saying, well, it's absurd to try to create a meaning for life or to find one, but we keep trying. It's
Yeah.
insane, but we keep doing it. And that there was a prophecy made over me back when I was Christian and very young, 2000, literally the year 2000, that my mom captured. And it was God saying to me through Christ, I will answer all of your questions to your satisfaction and in my timing.
Mm.
So if I choose that context, and I choose to put faith in that because it makes the journey a little easier, then perhaps there's time to play and engage. So you gave the other piece of the answer, which is like we're here on Earth School to play with Earth tools according to Earth rules. So with lead gen specifically, because you're talking to somebody whose job was to help heart-centered coaches scale to six figures with organic marketing and wealth dynamics until he pivoted to this stuff, right? So I would always say you will never receive farted out of the anus of God in the Akashic records into your brain a fully formed and fully fledged lead generation system or the practices and embodied capacities for marketing and sales. You just won't.
Mhm.
So it has to
Nor
be.
are you even the person that can wield that if you haven't gone through the pain of birthing it yourself.
Exactly.
That's the whole fucking point.
Yeah. I wouldn't have him as my life partner had I not go through hell and heartbreak and all of the relationships that I had leading up to this relationship. I would not have the capacity to hold this relationship. I would not have the capacity to trust myself in this relationship, to know how to regulate, to know how to like be emotionally intelligent, to communicate my needs and my desires and stand in my truth and my boundaries. And I wouldn't be the woman that I am today without every single relationship that led me to this man.
See that's it. Because I came to you about 15 minutes ago, like shattered and showing you the different pieces and the shards. And that gave me shivers, especially when it connected to like you may heal your mindset and your orientation, or somebody may have the breakthrough to where they're no longer a fat person, but the fat does not fall off of their body instantaneously.
Nope.
Yeah.
So the new habits, the new behaviors, and in my case, the anger or the rage potentially under the surface at God was rage at, God for letting dad beat the crap out of mom until she was bleeding and dying while pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And being in a house where that happened. So that's still in my liver to some degree. According to Chinese medicine, that's where it's stored. And
Yeah.
I've been in this process of detoxification and body work to actually touch and stay and feel with what's there. The most excruciating pain in my entire life for 90 minutes doing body electronics in my house last month. And it was just scratching the surface. I don't know how many sessions it'll take. I don't know what that'll look like, but the context that fell out of this conversation for me has been dramatically impactful, useful, empowering, and helpful because, the God in Kabbalistic mysticism breaks and shatters and outpours into these different vessels, the Sephirot. And then each vessel gets full and pours into another. And so, like, maybe the point is that each of us has the experience, even though not the reality, but the experience of being shattered and being on that path of putting ourselves back together or allowing ourselves to be, by the divine surgeon, put back
Mhm.
together. You can't give to God what you don't have. So theoretically, if I were in a relationship with my ideal partner right now, that anger, that resentment, that rage might push her out or
Yeah.
push me out or defeat what's available. So where I'm also going to let go and let God. It's funny you put it on your neck because that's the connection fundamentally between what we know and what to do. So
Mm.
whatever it is, I'm going to let go and let God instead of having a pain in the neck from not doing what I'm told. This is fucking awesome. And yeah, what I see that my path is cultivate intuition and leaps of faith and take those steps and then keep working knowing that my wife is at the end of the story wherever that is meant to show up and that no I don't have control over that and to not resist or judge my flow and journey on the way there because maybe I do have another partner between now and her. That's fine. I'm clear on my ultimate intent and vision. So anyway, enough about me. Thank you for your grace, lady and
Thank
gentlemen.
you.
Anything else you want to dance with or share or yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to bring it full circle for myself, which is closing with this uh, conversation that Taylor and I had that she shared where I'd sent a text message about her heart needing to open if I was going to stay in the relationship. I didn't share what had shifted within me to send that follow-up phone call. And I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about, which was I had this, what triggered it was this fear that I was going to do all of the work to open this woman's heart and she was going to give it to somebody else. And in so many ways, that's such a mirror of what I was expecting of God in my business and my life and any of these other things was that the work was already going to be done and I was just going to magically have it. And I had this, it's so masculine, but I had this visual metaphor come through of like, would I rather do the work to build a business that is generating millions of dollars, or would I rather inherit a business that is already generating millions of dollars? The true answer in here is I want to be the guy that did the work to build it because that's what I actually want. I want to feel the courage and the truth and the knowing within myself that I created that and I have it within me. I inherit that. Yeah, I got the money, but I'll get bored of it very quickly. That's where you see these people who come from, like, were born into wealth and they're kind of fucks. Not all of them, but some of them. And it's because they didn't do the work and they don't know how to do the work. And so they're deeply insecure, even if they have all of the things that we generally perceive as success. Same with doing the work to open your heart, to be there, to know that who I get to become in the process of learning how to do that, learning how to be that man, holding that space, however long it takes, whether it's even done in this lifetime, is such a worthy pursuit. It's such a worthy pursuit. And the same for you, Lewis. This journey you are on, seeking this woman, it's a
Woman.
worthy pursuit. It's a worthy pursuit. So the whole point is it's so fucking cliche, but it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. In so many ways, the man you are becoming, who you are being torn apart over and over again, the blade being stuck in the fire, smashed, stuck in the fire, smashed, that is a worthy pursuit because the blade that is being created is like Hattori Hanzo steel? Like it's the perfect katana that has been thousands of times folded and smashed by the master until it is a perfect blade. It's what makes that sword such a beautiful sword to wield versus some blade that just got stuck in, pounded a couple times, and then went out on the battlefield and people tried to fight with it.
And I want to circle that to the moment where you were sharing about your experience with Bufo specifically, because Scott, you were saying like torn apart and put back
Yeah.
together, torn apart, put back together, torn apart.
Wow.
Like that is what God is tearing you apart and putting you back together over and over and over and over and over again.
Wow.
And that's the beauty of life. And so it's such a beautiful reference and metaphor that it's like your heart gets broken and then you put it back together. And for me, even my willingness to
Yeah.
say yes to this relationship came from the willingness of I might have my heart broken again, and I'm willing to have my heart broken again because I want to see what could be on the other side of that willingness rather than having my heart closed and having it like I need to protect myself for forever. I'm unwilling to experience the pain again. It was I'm willing to experience the possible pain that would come from saying yes to being in partnership, yes to being in relationship. And I feel like that has been like for me my own version of that is without that willingness I wouldn't be here. And without your willingness you wouldn't be here either.
There's a Japanese art form where they'll take a pot that has broken and they
It's
will, yes, you know it. They will glue it back together with gold uh, pigment so that it actually highlights the cracks
Mm.
and it makes the pot more beautiful having been broken and then put back together. And so I see you in that process over and over again. And you are becoming stronger through it. That's the point. You are stepping into your own version of the kingdom of God through being made ready, tested, worthy. We're all worthy.
But we're not all the way worthy.
Yeah, but we got to be refined.
Yeah.
It's like who wants to follow a king that hasn't been tested?
Yeah.
uh-huh. And on that note, forged in fire to penetrate the world with deeper purpose and to penetrate one's woman. I mean, it's a very masculine process. And I hear that your inner masculine, both of you have gone through it to get here. Um, I am renewed to aim at heaven because aim at heaven and you'll get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you'll get neither. Don't give up. Thank you.
Mm.
You're welcome.
And I've got more to say about that after we end. But how do people find you? What are you up to that you love that you're offering?
Ladies first.
If anybody wants to follow me, they can find me on Facebook at Taylor Tosczak, Toszczak, or follow me on Instagram at Taylor the Life Coach, or go to my website, tailoredlifecoaching.com, and tailored is Taylord, lifecoaching.com. And I'd say that's the place that you can find me and see what I'm up to, see what I'm offering, see what I'm creating. I'm very feminine and intuitive with my creative process, and I'm always birthing or gestating something. And right now I'm in the process of gestating something. And so it's not to be announced on the podcast, but it will be announced as the readiness is ready.
And I do men's coaching, but in context of this conversation, I want to invite people if they want to connect deeper about this conversation around God. I have a men's group called Brothership. You can find it at brother-ship/brothership. And we do this work. It's just a group of men who sit and wrestle with God. Monday nights, it's super accessible. It's $50 and per month, and it's every week, Monday night, we sit with the Bible and we just wrestle as men and we bring our problems to the call, real challenges, not the shit that you bring to church or like not the shit that isn't discussed at church. It's the shame, it's the dark stuff, it's the things that are not able to be expressed. So that's a really good entry point to find my work.
Amazing. Well, thank you. I love you. You're awesome. God bless you. Your voice is just dripping with love and value. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please like, share, and subscribe. This has been another episode of Make Love Easy.